Hi, everybody. I'm Rabbi Aaron Potek. I'm the Senior Rabbi and Executive Director of Jewish Life here at 6 and I. You know those documentaries where the celebrities show up at the house they grew up in and they knock on the door and the person welcomes them and is like, welcome, but it's a little bit like, why are you welcoming them to their old house? Anyway, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Shira Stutman back to 6 and I. And of course, welcome to all of you as well, both those of you who are here in person and those of you joining virtually. For those who don't know, Rabbi Shira was 6 and I's first ever full-time rabbi and my predecessor. From a blank canvas, she created the vision for 6 and I's radically welcoming approach to Jewish learning and community. She launched the Jewish Welcome Workshop, our year-long Intro to Judaism course, which is currently in its, 15th year right now. She recognized the need in the community for young couples and interfaith relationships to have guidance for how to navigate their relational challenges, and so she created Interfaith Couples Workshop, which is, about to start its 47th cohort this week. I'm not going to list all of the things because we don't have time for it, but I can say that through her tireless work here, she has transformed thousands of lives and made 6 and I a nationally recognized destination for the next generation of Jews. And on a personal note, just one paragraph of a personal note, but I can't help myself. Rabbi Shira is why I'm here. And I don't just mean why I'm here tonight, because that's obviously true, and she's why we're all here tonight. I mean, she's the reason I'm here at 6 and I. She hired me 6 years ago. She recommended that I fill her very big shoes when she left 4 years ago. She has advocated for me again and again, and I would not be where I am without her. And as much as I want to feel and think that I'm special, looking out at this sea of people, it is clear that you all have also been touched by Rabbi Shira in different ways, and it's just who she is and what she does. She lifts people up and helps them feel seen and inspired. It's no surprise then that there are many promotional partners tonight, both locally and nationally, who have decided to lift up tonight's event. So I'd like to acknowledge and thank JWI, Gather DC, the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School, Honeymoon Israel, The Experiment, PJ Library, PRX, the Lillian Albert Small Capital Jewish Museum, and the Aspen Jewish Congregation. Thank you. So we're here for her book, The Jewish Way to a Good Life, Find Happiness, Build Community, and Embrace Lovingkindness. In it, Rabbi Shira distills 3,500 years of Jewish wisdom and culture into practical, time-tested strategies that anyone can adopt to find meaning, cultivate good values, and experience joy. She reminds us you don't have to be Jewish to do Jewish, and she tells us how, covering topics including kindness, love, rest, health, education, community, and more. Tonight, Rabbi Shira will be in conversation with the author and New York Times op-ed columnist David Brooks. We've been fortunate to have David on our stage many times, including for his #1 New York Times best-selling books, that's with an S at the end, The Second Mountain and The Road to Character, and most recently for How to Know a Person, about fostering deep connections. He's written thoughtfully about his own journey with faith, and we look forward to him bringing that lens into this conversation tonight. A little bit later in the program, we're going to open up to hear questions from you, the audience. You can line up at either one of these microphones here, not until we open up for questioning. And following the program, Rabbi Shira will be signing books, so please stick around for that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening, and please help me give Rabbi Shira Stutman and David Brooks a warm welcome back to 6 and I.
I've done a fair number of book events. I've never done one where the audience was already so in the pocket of the author. Did you do their bris? Like what?
I have never done a bris yet. Yeah, it is.
Wait till you get to Aspen.
This is really wonderful. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, everyone, and thank you, David. This is a little surreal, and it's sort of an out-of-body experience, but let's just do it. Let's go with it.
Okay. Welcome to the Bima.
Thank you.
This is a big-time homecoming for you. It's a bit of an important homecoming for me. My 2 kids had bar mitzvahs, bar and bat mitzvahs right here on this Bima. In fact, my first Joshua would have been 1993 or 94, had the first Jewish service in this room for about 50 years when it came back and became a synagogue.
I always felt like this room, unlike any other place I've ever led services, is filled not only with the actual people who are alive today, but is filled with like all the spirits of all the people who've worshipped here over the years. It's a very special place.
So the book introduces us to 3,500 years of Jewish wisdom or more, could be 5,000. And I just want to run through some of the concepts that are the core pillars of what Judaism teaches us about the good life. And I'm just going to throw out these core pillars and ask you to expound.
I love expounding.
Yeah, I figured.
I've made a career out of it.
And then we'll get to you guys about 45 minutes in.
Great.
And I know you got a lot of Jews in the room, so you didn't come here to hear us speak. You came here to hear yourself speak. And so we'll allow for plenty of room for that.
No, but that's why the converts are the best.
The
The converts, they're more humility.
The quiet Jews. So the first one, and you really lead the book with this, is chesed.
Yeah.
And so that's that comes out as like the central starting point. So what's core about that?
So, chesed, first of all, I do want to tell you that one of my disappointments with the book is that I don't do the audiobook. Someone else they hired. And I don't know if anyone else here is as addicted to Audible or Libby as I am. Often the people who read the Jewish books are not that good. But I double-checked. The one who reads this is good. And I checked by listening to her say the word chesed over and over and over again. So it's good. So look, chesed, I think... Look, it'll be no surprise to anyone who's met me for longer than 5 minutes, which is most of you in this room, how I'm feeling about this moment that we're in, politically, as a country, and personally. And, the work of tzedek, which I also talk about in the book, is important. But there's something about chesed that feels really critical to me in this exact moment. Chesed, of course, is it's often translated as acts of loving kindness, but it's really so much more than that. It is an act of giving to someone who you know or someone who is in your community. It is a sort of one-on-one act that is not always required by Jewish law, but is often is an offering from one person to another. And I think in this moment of base cruelty that we are experiencing as a country, the idea of the reminder to center ourselves by being of service to others is more important than ever. I did a little book thing in Philadelphia yesterday, and there are all these people around the table, and one of the people is carrying so much pain about this moment, and specifically for her, about the way that she feels she's being treated by others in this moment. And she says, "I'm a good person. It's not about me. It's about them." And she had a specific them in mind, right? And I'm sure we all have a specific them in mind at this moment. And the conversation we were able to get into is, okay, what if it's not only about them? What if it's also about you and how you show up in the world and how you can bend the arc a tiny bit more to make the world better for one more person? I just think that if each of us really set as a task every single day to do one act of chesed, what's that, the science, the butterfly effect thing? It's called something.
It's called the butterfly effect.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, fine. So it's there is just a piece of me that believes that the butterfly effect would take effect and it would just ripple out into the world. And it would actually make a difference, not only to us as individuals, but actually sort of to our country and to our world.
Yeah, as you were saying, chesed to me has a bit of a homey, Hamish. It's not just kind. It's a warm, homey embrace. It's a hospitality. There's a certain flavor to it.
That is true because it's often so interpersonal, right? It actually is a meal given to a person. It is a dance that you do for celebrants at their wedding. There is something about looking in the face of the other in a certain, Levinasian sort of way and actually engaging them in an act. And in Judaism, we talk about gimilut chasadim, the idea of acts. It's often, as I said, sort of facilely translated as acts of love and kindness. But what it really means is it's sort of the Jewish take on karma, as much as I understand how karma actually works, which is that we are putting chesed out into the world with the belief that chesed breeds chesed out in the world. So we don't believe that everything we put out will come back to us, but we do believe that it'll come back to someone else, and in a very much larger sense, ultimately it'll come back to us. Yeah. So it is homey. Also, what's great about chesed is you can target your chesed work to you and your personality. So, for instance, you go to a wedding. Are you the kind of person who likes to, be on the dance floor all night?
We're going to get to that. I'm about to go to Hora, but go ahead.
Oh, really? Okay, fine. I'm not someone who likes to dance at weddings. That's one of the core teachings around chesed in the Jewish tradition. But I am someone who likes to sit and talk to people. Shocker. And so I can tailor my acts of chesed to actually being with people in one-on-one conversation, people who are sick, people who maybe just had a new baby, people who are elder, people who are lonely. And I don't have to tailor my chesed to being the one who's doing the Macarena. You can actually be you in your acts of chesed. Okay.
My joke in my family is we grew up in our culture was think Yiddish, act British. And so we were super non-emotional. So my version of chesed is showing no emotion at all toward you right now. But let's move to the wedding, because you do raise that, and you have this good sentence in the book, and it really startled me about the dance.
Yeah.
Because you go to I will not say this, non-Jewish American weddings.
Yeah.
And there are some nice dances.
Yeah.
And me, I'm all about Uptown Funk. And it's fine, but one of my students he's Orthodox, and it would show the men were dancing over here and the women over there, but as we circled, there was a level of uproarious joyity that I've never incurred, even with Uptown Funk.
Yeah, that's on my Spotify playlist, Uptown Funk.
Really? Yeah.
How many of you? Raise your hand if I did your wedding, if you're here. That's so lovely.
Wow.
Okay, so if I did your wedding, you are going to know everything that I'm about to say, so I'm sorry. Right, so you go to what you called a normal wedding.
I'm going to say
non-Jewish. You go to a sort of American-style wedding, and what is the first dance? The first dance are the brides or the grooms, in the middle, by themselves, often doing a choreographed dance, which to me is so beyond my intelligence. I can't even imagine. But anyway, and everyone's sort of watching them. But as you said, if you go to a traditional Jewish wedding, you have the hora. That is a mosh pit, everyone on the floor. I often will encourage couples to do, especially if it's an interfaith marriage, to do a hora clinic the day before the wedding. Because as we all know, the rules of dancing at Sixth and I, one of them is you actually don't have to know how to dance in order to just dance, because you're just I call it holy chaos, right? HOLY. Everyone is sweaty at the end. Everyone is part of it. And that's, sort of Judaism at its core, right? Even a wedding is not just about the two people getting married. Even a wedding is about everyone there and is about the community. So, yes, that's true. In America, because a lot of us, except for a lot of the people in this room, don't do a lot of the pre-wedding festivities, which also include a lot of mosh pitting. The hora has become the focal point of representing, an embodied representation of what Judaism is trying to do at a wedding. Right. It's my favorite part. It's my favorite part. And I've been to a number of non-Jewish weddings now where they've done the hora. I don't know if you have as well.
Yeah.
And where they've picked the people up on the chairs, and I mean, if you can't beat them, join them. I think it's great.
Just
so.
With more mayonnaise and blueberry bagels. So what's fun about the hora, and what the point you make, it's not just about the couple, like the prince and the princess.
Yeah.
It is about the whole community, and you are celebrating with the community. And so that now I'm going to take you to the other end of the emotional spectrum.
Yeah, okay.
But it's the same message. It's Shiva.
Yeah.
And I think Shiva is like a brilliant, just on a zillion levels, a brilliant way to reestablish community in the midst of mourning and loss. So talk us through like the sort of intellectual background and the cultural importance of Shiva.
Yeah.
I feel like I should say for the people who aren't Jewish, the Shiva is the mourning ritual after the funeral.
First of all, let me defend the people who aren't Jewish in this room, because a lot of the non-Jews in this room know a lot more about Judaism than a lot of the Jews, born Jews. No offense, but the non-Jews are the ones who are showing up for the classes. But we can talk about that. That's different. Right. So Shiva comes from the Hebrew word Sheva, which means what? 7, right. And so Shiva represents the 7 days after a burial of someone in which the closest in mourners sit together in a home and they just do their job, which is mourning and being sad, and the community carries them through. In fact, the whole idea, the whole idea of Shiva is that because the mourners are in their home, the community has to come in to make a minyan, a group of 10 people, so that they can say Kaddish. That's like where the idea comes from. And so Shiva is actually, it's a very countercultural tradition, I think, in the United States. First of all, because I would argue it's because of the Christian tradition that sort of, if you are a Christian, there is more of an understanding that you know exactly what's going to happen to you once you die. Whereas with the Jews, we're sort of like, I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen to us? That's not really. I can talk to you about it. It's going to be fine. But I've gone to Christian funerals that are celebrations of life. I've gone to Christian funerals that are called homegoings, right? Because they're actually But for the Jews, we're just sad because we want that person here in this life with us. And so, so it is actually, it's a very, so many Jewish traditions, when you actually drill them down to their essence, they're about being of service to and caring for the other. Specifically your community, but also for the other, however they show up in your world. And Shiva is one of these. And, I hemmed and hawed a little bit before answering because Shiva is actually really hard. Like, have you ever done a full Shiva? It can be very boring. You have a lot of people who come in your space, like trying to talk to you. You are, in a way, the mourner, as much as they're not supposed to be the host, ends up having to sort of be on for an entire week. And more people nowadays don't do 7 days of Shiva. They do 3 days or even 1 day of Shiva, and that's for a lot of different reasons. But if I were in charge, if I were the Pope of the Jews, what I would love is to actually bring back Shiva, because forcing yourself to actually be deeply and profoundly sad while really hard is helps you move through the process of mourning. Right now, I'm reading Geraldine Brooks's book, Memorial Days. I don't know if she was here for that book, but it's all about how she didn't really get to sit Shiva for her husband when he died, and so 3 years later, she basically goes to sit Shiva in Australia. So it is a very, very, very meaningful, it's just a very full time to be with your family, to be with your community, and to remember that you've actually lost someone that you love.
Yeah. But one of the genius parts of it is that it gives you, makes you do stuff. Like you're the host, but you do have to look after the casseroles, and I mean, so it like keeps you busy. Well, but then it also gives you the option of talking about the dead, whether you want to or not. Like there's all these rituals within the practice that are so psychologically sophisticated.
They are psychological. Technically, if you are the mourner, you're not supposed to be with the casseroles, right? Technically, if you're the mourner, you're supposed to be sitting on a low chair and having people come and stand with you, and they talk if you want to talk, they don't talk if you don't want to talk, and you talk, and they're talking about the person who's passed away. That's why it's so painful in a way. There's a part of you that wants to go in and do the casseroles, because that's actually, that's the British piece. That's like the escaping your emotions part of it all, right? Yeah. But like the Jewish cacophony of emotions is asking you to be in your sadness, to be in the, I mean, half the time the person who died, you didn't even like them, right? You had a complicated relationship with them, but you are in the fact that this person who died didn't show up for you at this moment, that you didn't show up for them. Like, think of all of the stuff that's actually in a real live dead person moment that's actually going through your mind, and it's not easy. And so that's why Shiva is so exhausting. But what it does give you is it gives you the Jewish rituals around death give you the next right step. There's always the next right step. And one of the things that I've probably talked about with a lot of you in this room is you might be a convert to Judaism, which means your family's not Jewish, or you might not be Jewish, but you're sort of Jewish adjacent and following a Jewish path. So what do you do when your non-Jewish family members pass away? And there's not, I remember, I can tell you exactly who it was, though some of you know her, Carla Hashley, was a old-time Sixanaira. I assume this is not going to be, too private a thing I just say. Carla Hashley calls me, this is probably 2011, 2010, and she says, someone just passed away in my family. The funeral is in 3 months. And I said, what the hell? What are you, I grew up uber, bubbled Jew, and I had never heard of a funeral being in 3 months. And so we had to figure out how to build Jewish ritual around a non-Jewish funeral. And it was actually, ultimately, I don't know if it was meaningful for her, you all can ask her, but it was deeply meaningful to me because it makes you drill down on, okay, what are the important pieces of Jewish mourning that we want to carry forward right now in this moment?
Okay. I have a couple more concepts, so I'm going to take a little detour because you mentioned it.
Great.
Which is, okay, you die, and then what happens?
You want me to talk about that now?
Yeah. It kind of seems like an important subject.
What do you think happens?
I have no clue. I just know
Really?
It's beyond my imagining. That's my main concept. Whatever happens is beyond my comprehension.
All right. I agree. No, look, all right. I mean, all joking aside, Jews believe, ultimately we believe we don't know, just like with God, we actually don't know. And so what's most important is this moment and then arguably the messianic moment that we're trying to bring. But there is a sort of general belief in Jewish tradition that there is something called Olam Haba, which is the world to come. And whether in that world to come we are somehow embodied or whether we're sort of souls that are sort of just wrought up in the ether. The ancient rabbis in the Talmud, what did they love doing? They love studying Torah, or at least that's what they want us to think. And so to them, what was Olam Haba? It was a yeshiva where they could sit and study Torah all day. So the truth is we actually don't know, but there is some sort of belief that our energy is not over when we die. It goes somewhere. I didn't really understand the Jewish concept of hell, which, thank you, Rabbi Scott Perlow. I don't know where you're sitting in this room when you taught a class at 6 and I. Where is? Oh, there he is, right? You taught that class 15 years ago about things they didn't teach you at Hebrew school, and one of them was we have a concept of hell. Who knew? They didn't teach us that in Philadelphia. So we do have, but mostly we don't really have a concept of hell. We have a concept of after we die, our soul floats around for a little while, and then it's sort of wrought up in something else. Yeah.
Now, this is going to be about the gestalt of Judaism. It strikes me as a cerebral faith. I'm about to say something you're going to correct. Sometimes in moderating, you say the stupid thing, so you can say the smart thing. But it's so unnatural for me, a New Yorker. But so there's a lot of Torah stuff. There's Talmud. It seems very the most cerebral of the faith traditions. And why is that wrong?
It's not. I feel like this is half the conversations that Chana and I have on the podcast, right? Which is about sort of what is Judaism ultimately at the end of the day? So yes, part of Judaism is cerebral, meaning we have the books, we have the studying. That's such a big. We are a law-based tradition, and the way that a lot of lawyers are cerebral, so are we. And we are also a deeply embodied tradition, right? When you think about all the things that Jews do with their bodies to sort of experience spirituality, from going to the mikvah, the ritual bath, to eating matzah on Passover, which is in 2 weeks. I can't believe that, right? To shaking the lulav and the etrog, one of the weirdest of all the Jewish, to the bris itself. That is not a cerebral act, right? That is any of us who think too long about a bris will not do it, right? Yeah. That is a primal act. So the truth is, yes, we are cerebral. And if you studied the sort of Jewish tradition of the early 1700s, you might believe that that's true. But also, if you study the Hasidic tradition, right, the Hasidic tradition is not as cerebral. That is in your kishkas, it's in your soul, it's in your heart. And also, if you study the Musar tradition, that's Judaism in practice, right? And so I think we sometimes get a bad rap, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I feel like I want to call out every single person in this room who helped make me the rabbi that I am, which is basically all of you. So it's like now I want to channel a little bit of Alana Eichner and say, like, maybe it's a little bit of our internalized anti-Semitism that wants to keep us a little bit closed and cerebral, because if we walk around the world like this, maybe they won't see us and they won't kill us. If we walk around the world like this, then they're going to kill us right away. I don't know what it is, but we are not just cerebral.
Do you think that's a creation of the American conservative tradition? Obviously, the Orthodox yeshivas are they're pretty cerebral. Like,
Right. Well, the Orthodox yeshivas are really cerebral, right, because they come from what's called more of the mitnaged tradition, which is much more cerebral. But you have like if you went on a yeshiva tour in Israel, right, which I would love to take you on one day. I think that would be super fun. But if you went on a yeshiva tour, there are also yeshivas in which there are guys, and there are always guys, with the long beards who are dancing and smoking pot and just very, very much experiencing a different kind of Judaism. Now, what is true is that it is not a Judaism. There is no Judaism entirely divorced from the cerebral part of Judaism, right? So it's like, if you're one of the dancing Hasids, right, you go to Israel, and as I have with many of you in this room, and you see the guys on the street, the Nachman guys, like with the big white kippot, right, and they're dancing in the street, like, they're also learned in text, right? It's not denuded of that, but it's just, I don't know if it comes from being part of a Christian country. I don't know if it comes from the Jewish love of learning, which I also write about in the book, and sort of the Jewish connection to learning. But we are much more than just cerebral.
did you say smoking pot? Rabbi smoking pot?
In fact, I can talk to you about that because, again, Rabbi Scott Perlow and I, but mostly Rabbi Scott Perlow, wrote sort of a tshuva, like a responsa on, I thought you'd like that I was calling you out for this. I'll forward it to you after this. Yes, smoking pot, if it's healthy for you in the same way that alcohol is healthy, smoking pot's totally fine. You can find pot that's certified kosher. I will send it to you as a thank you gift.
Thank you. Wow. A lot of pot and then some matzah. Awesome. Let's talk about Leviticus.
One of my favorites.
So most people in Washington, D.C., and most Jews in Washington, D.C., and in American urban settings are culturally more on the progressive side of things. And so I guess before I get to that, a general question for you,
yes,
who live in Washington, D.C., you're about to move to a poor community, a small, struggling community in Colorado.
I'm not, yes, okay.
Yeah. And so what about the Torah is most challenging to the zeitgeist around us?
When you are speaking about Torah, you're talking about Torah in its entirety, like not meaning just the 5 books of Moses, but sort of like Jewish teachings writ large, or are you talking specifically about the book itself?
Wherever you want to go.
I'm going to speak very personally here, because this is a friendly enough audience, and you're a friendly enough guy. So what challenges me about Torah is actually reading it, right? So this book is everything that I want us to be in the world, right? I see this as it's a book of hope. It is a book about if we follow these Jewish traditions and teachings even 1% more, the world will be transformed. And yet one thing that happens when you actually read the entirety of Torah is it's not all about chesed, right? It's not all about love, and it's not all about community. It is all of those things. And also there are some pretty hateful things in Torah. And I'll say it even more, I want to say it differently. There are some texts that are being used and weaponized in very hateful ways, right? The texts themselves, they're just words on a page. I don't believe that the Torah was written by God and given at Sinai. I believe it was created by human beings. But what you see happens is some texts are taken and lifted up to build a world of joy and kindness and inclusion and diversity and all of that. And then there are texts that are just used totally differently. And I think what we're seeing right now in a number of different ways are texts, first of all, that I wish we could throw on the ash heap of history, being the ones that are just pretty prominent, being used pretty prominently by people with whom I disagree. And of course, being in community with people with whom you disagree is also part of what it means to be Jewish, right? This is all part of the mess of the Jewish community. But, there are times when these last few years where, like, I've opened the Torah and I've read a verse, and it struck me in a way that it never struck me in my first 50 years because of the way that it's being used right now. And that will never not hurt. When I... one of the people that I thank in this book is my bat mitzvah tutor, whose name was Michael Stern. May his memory be for a blessing. And he supported me in almost everything I did except for going to rabbinical school. And for those of you who know Michael Stern, which is, I hope, enough of you, it was surprising. And he said, you should never do professionally what you love most personally, because it'll ruin it for you. And there have been that moments where, like, I take this Torah, like, there is nothing I love more. I love my family. I love you all very much. But, like, in terms of inanimate objects, there's nothing I love more than the Torah. And every day I go out and I say, will you love this? Will you love this? Will you love this? And sometimes people will say no, and then sometimes they'll say, how can you love this? And I say, I don't know, but I do.
Is this a D.C. Michael? We all know a Michael Stern. Is this a guy who lived in D.C.?
He did.
Godatis?
Yeah.
Oh, I know Michael Stern. Wonderful man.
Yeah. I know. I was lucky, right?
Yeah, you were. So you mentioned in the book you take the Torah seriously, but not literally.
Yeah.
So explain to me how you read this text.
Okay. Here's the Torah. I'm trying to figure out how to enter into the question. To me, the Torah is the foundation of what Judaism is. And like anyone who's ever had a rotten foundation knows, if you have a rotten foundation, the whole house is going to fall apart. But what Judaism is only the beginning. It begins with Torah, but Judaism is the house that we have built. And so for me, I take Torah very seriously. And every time I read a verse, especially the verses that I want to throw right out the window, and there are a number of them, I'm like, okay, why is this verse in Torah? But then what I get to do is be in conversation with thousands of years of commentators who had questions either exactly the same or slightly different. And so I get to have questions answered about things that are live for me in my life now that ancient rabbis never could have imagined, that I get to use as I try to build a life of meaning. And so when I try to teach Torah to people, it's not that I want people to be fundamentalists. I mean, actually, Jews, there is no such thing as taking Torah literally, because Torah has been interpreted for the entirety of its existence almost. And so what I want people to do is find meaning in their lives using Torah as a springboard, using Torah as a foundation. And Torah, what I'm talking about here, is like all of Jewish teachings. It's really hard because there's so much Jewish stuff. You know what I mean? There's so much you need to know to live a full Jewish life. But that's my life's work.
Okay. Let's take one verse, which you talk about in the book, which is love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay.
And what?
Oh, sorry.
She's giving me contempt for love your neighbor as yourself.
I had an entire conversation in my head when you said that, but it's okay. I'll leave it over there.
Well, set aside your unpleasant interlocutor and talk to me. So the first meaning a lot of people have of that is, you love yourself, you should love your neighbor. But a second meaning is, you don't love yourself so much. Maybe you should love yourself as much as you love your neighbor. And a third meaning is, you feel okay about that other person. Maybe you should feel a little about yourself. There are a lot of different meanings of that text. So how do you? It's like a central concept.
Yeah. certainly one that we need to bring to the fore a little bit more in this moment that we're living in, I think. So here's the thing about that verse in Judaism. The truth is that the majority of rabbis really believe that we should take that verse literally, meaning when it says love your neighbor as yourself, it's actually talking about the people who live around you. That verse is not meant to teach love all of humanity as you love yourself. We have lots of other verses in the Torah that teach love the stranger, love the other, but this one is actually about loving the person sitting next to you in this room, right? Or loving the person who is your next door neighbor, which I would argue is actually pretty difficult, right? Like we just, and I think it comes from all the reasons that you articulated. It's because we don't like ourselves enough, and so we project onto other people a lot of the things we hate about ourselves. That I hear a lot of. It's also because we don't actually know our neighbors. Like one of the things that's happening in this moment is so many of us are atomized in certain ways that we don't know the people who live next door to us. And so I think we've actually, it's because we don't know how to love, right? Like love in Judaism is an action word, right? It is deeply connected to chesed. Like that's why chesed is translated as loving kindness, right? So love is not something that is an end to itself. That's not, Judaism actually doesn't care very much about how you feel about things. It cares about what you do about those feelings. And so I do think the love your neighbor as yourself is more important than others. And you know what? Like, if you live in Petworth, start with Petworth, right? And then we can like reverberate out. I know that my son is in college up in Providence, and you know, he hangs out with all of these lefties. He lives in like the Enviro house. You know, you all know Caleb, long hair, beard, and I said, how are you responding to this moment? And he said, we're focusing on our neighborhood in Providence. He's like, that's what we're doing. We're caring for our neighborhood. And I actually thought that could be actually a beautiful, that could be a sort of beautiful learning from COVID, right? The way that we took care of each other a little bit, at least some of us around here during COVID, is something that maybe we can remember to do a little bit more now.
Okay, I didn't think I was going to mention J.D. Vance, but I'm going to. So the Trump administration shuts down PEPFAR.
Yep.
And J.D. Vance is asked on some TV show his rationale for that. And he gave a version of, well, we're commanded, and he's Catholic, to care for those close to us most, and then the next ring, and then the next ring, and then far out, we care less.
Yeah.
And he used that as a rationalization to get rid of a program that gives drugs to people with HIV in Africa.
Yeah.
And so how would you think about that?
I would think, here's what I would think. I mean, look, there is, in Judaism, we do have teachings about circles of obligation, right? That we are supposed to take care of our own family, like literally our family. Then we are supposed to take care of the Jewish family. Then we are supposed to take care of the people who live near us. And then we're supposed to take care of the world. So it's not like the teaching is so contradictory to everything that Judaism says. What is also true is that in Judaism, it might say, love your neighbor as yourself once in the Torah, right? It's just once in the Torah. Let's go with once in the Torah, right? But it says, take care of the widows and the orphans and the strangers 34 times. Maybe it's 37. I always mix up. Let's just say a lot more times in the Torah. And so sure, if we were living in a moment of scarcity in which we had to make a choice between X and Y, I still couldn't even argue taking back closing down the healthcare to people overseas. But even if we were, but we are not in that space. We are in a space of abundance. We actually have enough to take care not only of people here in the United States, but also people overseas. And so it is a false narrative, and the false narrative comes out of a sense of cruelty, and it's just not. It's not true, it's not real, it's not fair, and it's a lot of other more terrible things that I'm not going to say because I don't speak for, I don't know, I don't want to,
right.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about politics and Gaza and all that, but I do
Great! Me neither!
I want to talk about the Jewish way to a good life. But you're writing this book. You wrote this book through the last, I don't know how long it took you, but through the last period.
Yeah.
And so what was that like? You're like, there's anti-Semitism on campuses. There's pressure. There's like global Sturmendrang. There's like, and you're writing a book on the core of the tradition. Like, what was it like as opposed to any other time in history?
Okay, I want to say a few things. They're not exactly entirely connected, and I can't promise you that I won't forget the last thing by the time I finish the first thing. But so first of all, there was anti-Semitism on campuses, but there was also some beautiful, vibrant Jewish life happening on campuses as well, and that is not getting lifted up. And those kinds of acts, the beauty of Jewish life that was happening on campuses, like the ones that my kids are on, that is reflected out, like those values are reflected in this book. But I wrote this entire book post-October 7th, right? I wrote it between like January, 2024, and June 2024. And to me, this book, look, if I start to cry, what they all know is that it happens all the time. I'm just going to keep on going. Because this book for me was a real balm in a really terrible moment. And it helped me remember that even as like I went to bed every night thinking of the hostages and like where were they in this moment and how were they going to sleep and what were they hearing, and I woke up every morning thinking, has a Palestinian baby been killed overnight? Like, what is happening in Gaza right now? Like, what is happening there is with me 25 hours a day. That is true. Okay, and I need you all to be able to hold more than one truth at the same time. Can we do that? Okay. So that is all true. And what is also true is that Judaism is much bigger than what's happening in Israel right now. Right? Israel is one part of what it means to be Jewish, and that might manifest differently for all of us in this room. But Judaism has been around for a really long time, and to live a good life as a Jew or as a Jewish adjacent person or using Jewish technologies requires much more than only thinking about what's happening over there every single moment. Yeah. And that's hard for me to say because I already feel like a traitor to 1,000 causes by just saying that out loud to you, David. I hope you
why do you feel that way?
I don't know, because I feel like it feels like I'm a traitor to the people living under siege over there. I feel like I'm a traitor. I feel like in America we have built a mythology. I just for 1,000 reasons. I want us to remember that Judaism is bigger than any one thing. I had a call last week with someone who I won't say, but they run. They're the dean of a graduate school, and they're feeling so much sadness. And they said, "I'm just losing all of my faith, and I'm losing my faith right now. And I want you, please give it back to me." Which is, no, we're laughing because it's like that. I don't know if I've ever felt more pressure as a rabbi than in that very moment, because I've lost my faith 100 million times in the last 15 months. And I've lost my faith 100 million times in the last 15 seconds. But what it means to be part of this Jewish mess is to lose it and gain it and to argue with it and then to come back to it and to turn 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 it. And it is so painful to be a rabbi sometimes. And it is the privilege of my life. But it's really hard.
Yeah, I had a friend, he was old when I was in my 20s, and he was a reporter for the Christian Science Monitor. His name was Arnold Beichman. And he grew up in Jewish in New York, and his job was to interview the Holocaust survivors as they came to America to greet them on the boat. And he totally lost his faith and never recovered it for the rest of his life. And so when you think about that, a congregant comes to you with faith that is straining and struggling.
Yeah.
What do you do? Like, how do you minister to someone how do you minister to, not to their ideas, not to their thought, but to their faith?
So Jews have a really hard time talking about faith.
I've noticed.
Yeah. I remember my father, may he rest in peace, when I told him that to graduate from rabbinical school, I had to write a 10-page spiritual autobiography. And my father, who is a man who went to synagogue every single week, read Torah, sent his kids to Jewish day school, serious Jew, his immediate response was, I could see you writing maybe 9 sentences on faith. But he said 9 pages. He's like, why? Who cares? And so, look, I think the Jewish approach to faith is both a blessing and an opportunity and a challenge. So if someone comes to me and says, I'm struggling in my faith, one of the things that I really have the privilege of doing is talking about, well, join the club, right? Like struggling with God. We believe in a God who can take anything that we throw at this God. So including, I don't know if I believe in you, right? And so struggling with faith has been part of the Jewish conversation, going back to the Psalms, where you have the psalmist screaming out, God, why have you hidden yourself from me? Right? And so if someone comes to me and says that, one thing we do is we study text together, which maybe is cerebral, but also can be very, very meaningful, because it shows that Jews have had language for what people are saying always. The other thing we do is that we talk about how different people, faith is manifested differently, right? For some people, faith is actually manifested in interactions with other human beings, right? For some people, faith is manifested in, today I went to my first protest since the inauguration. I have just been like this, which is a little bit embarrassing for me to say given where I am right now. And to me, that was a moment of faith, right? That was a moment of me coming out of my cocoon, back out into the world to celebrate Trans Day of Visibility. Mazel Tov and Yasher Koach, and we're so proud of all of we're so grateful to be part of a tradition that acknowledges more than 6 different types of genders, depending on how you read the text. I am very privileged, but anyway, I digress. And so, but ultimately, crises of faith are eternal in the Jewish tradition. And so being in relationship with someone with whom you can talk about this, where is it coming from? Why are you holding it? What are the small steps that you can take to move closer to relationship? And what would it mean if you were never in relationship with God as you imagined it could be? What would it mean? I remember when I was like a little baby rabbi, one of my first pulpits was in Boca Raton, Florida, which was hilarious. They brought me down there to minister to the kids, but all they wanted to do was study Mordechai Kaplan, which, have you ever read Mordechai Kaplan? I'm sure you've read Mordechai, of course you have. I have no idea what that man says. Mordechai Kaplan is the most opaque anyway, and it wasn't the best match. But anyway, I once was teaching about God and faith, and I remember my aunt Bonnie Jacobson, may she rest in peace, she was sort of a New Yorker, straight shooter, came up to me afterwards and she said, you really have to learn how to talk about God. And I said, thank you. But the truth is, when it comes to, so I still feel that right now when I'm talking to you. But the best time to talk about crises of faith is when you are in one of these moments in which you are experiencing God's presence, like at the top of a mountain, or at someone's deathbed, or at a birth, or whatever it is for you. Because there are moments where even people who don't believe in God experience God. And those are the moments we need to grab onto.
Yeah. When you're on PBS, you're kind of famous, but you're not really famous. And so a guy came up to me at a restaurant not long ago and said, you look familiar to me. You're my rabbi in Boca, right? Now I have an answer. No, that was Shira. That was Shira Stutman.
Wait, what'd you say?
I said no.
Oh, okay.
I was your imam in Boca. So I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up. And I started out by going through some of the jewels of the Jewish tradition, some of these concepts.
Yeah.
And I want to finish up with the crown jewel in this is unfair, but an important jewel, which is the one I have trouble honoring, and that's Shabbat. And so, what was it? Heschel said Shabbat is a palace in time.
Yep.
So, talk to us about that's in the book. Talk to us about Shabbat.
Well, okay, here's what I want to, look, Shabbat doesn't need explaining, right? Even you know that you should do Shabbat, right? Because Shabbat is every week when Friday afternoon comes, and I am not someone who believes that God has legislated Jewish law, meaning that God cares about whether or not I observe Shabbat. But I am able to sort of enter into this willing mythology and be like, oh, well, it's Shabbat now, so I can't work anymore. Because the idea, especially in Washington, D.C., I can't believe, is that the idea that we need a Shabbat, a Sabbath to rest, should be self-evident. Now, one of the things I got to learn from, being a rabbi to so many of you in the room is that there are ways that we need to figure out how to create Shabbats, even if we're not Orthodox, even if we're not going to observe all 25 hours. And so some of the Shabbat practices that have come out from the people in this very room are ones that I have taken with me into whatever I do. So for instance, right? This is not one that I've taken with me, but I have had, there are multiple people over the years who have worked at, certain places that, when you go in to work, you don't get to choose when you work, and they're like, the NSA or the CIA. They never call it those places, but those kinds of places. And they have to work on Shabbat. And so actually, there's someone in this room I know who actually was, I won't say who it is, who's like that, right? And and so they had to figure out how to observe Shabbat because they still want to do Shabbat. And so we sat down and we were like, okay, what are the things that you are allowed to do at your desk? You're not allowed to have your phone. Great, no using your phone. You're not allowed to light candles. So if you're working on a Friday night, you can't light Shabbat. But what you can do is you actually can turn on an electric candle. So what this person would do, we worked it out together, is that they would bring 2 electric candles to their desk when they had to work on a Friday night. They would light the Shabbat candles. They would have a moment of Shabbat there, and that was it. That was their Shabbat. We talked a lot about, with many of you, we talked about doing commerce on Shabbat. Because I grew up in such a bubble, I didn't realize that in the vast majority of the world, maybe you know, I don't know, of America, a lot of people do their errands on Saturdays. That's like an errand day, and Sunday is a rest day. Thank you for teaching me that, everyone. But Saturday is also like a brunch day for people who do brunch. And so we talked about how to use commerce differently. Like maybe on Shabbat, you still go out to brunch with your friends. Like that's a way of rest for you. That's a way of ceasing from creation for you. Fine, go out to brunch. But also, maybe don't do your errands, right? So Shabbat can be taken in a piecemeal way. And also remember that Shabbat is meant to help bring us back to Shabbat is remembered to help us remember to love ourselves so that the other 6 days we can also love others as well.
Okay, well, there are 2 microphones.
I've answered all the questions.
So we've learned it's okay to do brunch on Shabbat, just make the other people take the bill. Let's start over here.
Shira, it's only fitting that the first question should be from a non-Jew.
We like to call you Jewish adjacent, Lauren.
Thanks. So I appreciated what you were saying about neighborliness. I think it's very underrated, and it's a thing that I've been thinking a lot about. There's a quote that I keep thinking about. Those who are unhappy have no need for anything in this world but people capable of giving them their attention. And I wonder, and that goes to neighborliness, right? Your attention, how you interact with the people around you. But how do you think about that practically speaking? Like, we can talk about neighborliness all we want, saying hi, knowing the dog's name, but what does it mean to go that step further?
You mean like, should you have some January 6ers who move into your neighborhood? How do you treat them in a neighborly way?
I mean, you could bring that up as an example, sure.
What was the podcast name? We live here. Okay, fine, we live here now. So wait, I want to go back to that quote because that's such a meaningful quote. It's
okay.
People
so,
who
I'm like a little, it's from Simone Weil, who has a complicated relationship or did with Judaism and anti-Semitism and self-hatred and whatever. But it's those who are unhappy have no need for anything in this world, but people capable of giving them their attention. The love of our neighbor in all its fullness simply means being able to say, "What are you going through?" That's the second part.
So that is so beautiful. So what's the challenge there?
Well, I'm thinking in a practical sense because...
You only have 24 hours in the day?
Well, I'm not going to ask every neighbor, like,
no.
What's going on with you? Like, how, like, deeply, like, how can you sort of, because we're here, we're there, we're all over the place, you know?
Yeah.
That's not where we are these days. I'm not, like, borrowing a cup of sugar from my neighbor.
Right. So I actually think that's a beautiful, beautiful quote. I think that, and I think your point is well taken. Are you going to take your, you're going to take your answer from, is that how you do it? Take the answer? All right, I'll talk to all of you. I think it's a beautiful quote. I think there's a whole passage in the book in which I enumerate all the acts of chesed that I have not done in the last week or two, because, right, if all you do is, there's a reason in the Jewish mystical tradition, on one side of the godly emanations, we have chesed, right, the loving, and on the other side we have gevura, which is like strict boundaries. Because if all you do is chesed, then basically everything falls out and the world won't work. You need to have strict boundaries. So all I'm asking in terms of the neighborliness, right, is just do 1% better. Right? And if your neighbor comes to talk to you and is just talking at you, maybe if you have the time, just listen. Also, when it's time to go, you can say, I have to go now, Charlotte. I will, whatever her name is. Whatever, okay. Well, I have to go now, Plony. Like, I have to go. Like, I look forward to talking to you again in a few weeks. You have to draw the boundaries, otherwise you will just be you will be empty. But all Judaism asks, with all that we ask, whether you're doing tshuva, acts of repentance, whether you're doing chesed, is just to do 1% better. Also, if you're a misanthrope and you hate people, maybe talking to Charlotte is not going to be your mitzvah, and that's okay. But instead, it doesn't mean that you get to stay home. Instead, what it means is you have to find another mitzvah. Isaac.
Is it possible to go back to New Jersey after you die? Because that's where my grandfather was from and he died.
Oh, that's a very sweet question. So he went back, is that where he was buried?
Yes.
Right, so his body went back to New Jersey. Where do you think your grandfather is right now?
It went back to Paramus.
Just so you know, this is David Benowitz's son. He's been heckling me since 2012. Okay, so he went back. So his body went back to Paramus. Where do you think his soul is? Where do you think his spirit is, Isaac?
Alpine.
I just like inside New Jersey jokes. Okay.
He's at the Rich and Stockton West stop, exit 12 on the turnpike.
So the next book I'm going to write is about how Jews use humor in painful times. Here's what I think about your grandfather, because I happen to have met your grandfather, Isaac. I think your grandfather is someone who loved you very, very, very much, and your sister Marin too. And his spirit is in this room. His spirit is in your heart. His spirit is also in Paramus with your grandmother in Florida. His spirit is with your dad and with your mom. And that's the one good thing about being dead, is that you get to spread your spirit everywhere. And so I bet he'd be really, really proud of you for asking this question and roll his eyes a little bit at your dad. But mostly just be so proud of you and your sister Marin.
Hi, Rabbi Shira.
Hi.
I think I speak for everyone in the room when I say it is really good to see you.
It is so lovely to see you.
I'm really curious about how you struggled or didn't with the order of the topics in your book and the.
But my husband just asked me that question this morning. I wish I could say that I had thought it through. But if I'm being honest, I don't know. Is that something that I was supposed to think through when I was writing a book, like what order to put things in?
Jackson Pollock it.
It was sort of, I think, so no, it's, you know what? It's like the best midrash. The reason that you think they're in that order is exactly the reason that they're in that order. That's such a funny thing. I don't know. I have no idea. Perlo?
I have literally never been to an event where you call the people by their first name.
No, anyway, it's a long story.
Do you have any advice for someone who wants to be a rabbi? Okay, here's my actual question. And trust me, there were so many I could have asked right now and chose not to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You and I came to be rabbis actually at a time that was just so different than now. I mean, we were kids, and it was, things were looking up at that point. I was ordained in 08. I think you were ordained a few years before that. And I just can't even imagine what the ones who are coming out of school right now are facing. And so the question is actually a serious one, which is, what would you tell them if you could?
I've never been anything really but a rabbi, so I can't say that being a rabbi is the best job in the world. I can't say it's a really, really, really hard job. But I do think that one of the greatest, and there are a number of rabbis in the room, I mean, some of the rabbis that I look up to every single day, including this one. I think that the blessing of being a rabbi comes in the quiet moments. That what it means to be a rabbi, because I talk to a lot of rabbis who want to be on the bima, and they want like the whole circus part of the rabbinate. And that is part of it. But the most beautiful part of the rabbinate is sitting with someone and holding their hand as they die, right? The most beautiful part of it is sitting with a couple as they approach the chuppah, and that only gets sweeter and sweeter the longer that you've been married, because you sort of actually know what's coming down the pike, and they don't. And so it's actually there's something really meaningful about that. It isn't this moment. I mean, look at this moment where like everything in this book. I mean, it comes from Torah, but it comes from things that I've been trying to teach that you all have either taken or thrown back in my face over and over again. And I've had to refine them over and over again. So yeah, it's a terrible moment. It's a really different moment. But I would say that like being a rabbi is like I would imagine being like any sort of teacher. Like our job is to be of service at all times to the people that we serve. And to go back to basics as much as possible. What are we doing here? Why did Hashem put us on this earth? I am lucky that I have a deep faith in God. And to always start in the beginning with, to borrow a Buddhist term, a beginner's mindset. It really is such a good, it's a great job. And it's a terrible job for all the reasons too, but mostly it's a great one. Also find a chavruta. Find some partners that you can, yeah.
Of all things.
Why did I bring up the weed? I didn't bring it up. He brought it up.
You brought it up.
Oh, I did? Okay, sorry. Hello, Alana.
Hi. I was wondering, like, when did you, like, decide you wanted to write a book? Like, was it, like one day you were like, I want to write a book? Or were you, like, after, like, a few days or, like, months of, like, thinking, you're like, yeah, I think I want to write a book now?
Yeah. It's such a good question. Do you want, like, the political answer or the honest answer? Okay, so here's the honest answer. As you know, Alana, I have this podcast called Chutzpah that I am blessed to get to do with the brilliant Chana Rosen over here. And so someone called me and they were like, you should write a book. And every rabbi has a book in them. I mean, my guess is half of you. How many of you in this room feel like you have a book in you if you could just find the time to write it in someone? Oh, okay. So like many of us have books in us. And I just had someone who kept talking me until I said yes. And that's it. It's not a sexy answer. That's the real answer. Also, I was flying back and forth to Colorado every month. So I had all this time on an airplane. And like, what are you going to do for 7 hours on an airplane? But, you know, write a book. Also, I was deeply sad and in mourning about the world around me. So, thank you, beautiful.
Rabbi Shira, it's so good to see you.
It's so nice to be here.
I could sit and listen to you talk about radical welcoming and your concept around that all night. But I'd actually like to ask about something that you mentioned a little bit earlier. You talked about sort of the atomization of people and how we're more and more either siloed or completely alone. And I wanted to focus on community building.
Yeah.
And sort of what would you consider the first step that someone could and should do? Not should, but what is something that someone could do to either build a community around them or build a Jewish community around them?
Well, have you read that chapter of the book yet? Oh, so you should buy the book because there is a chapter, because to me, I am a community Jew, I am a peoplehood Jew, and there is a chapter of the book which is a step-by-step guide to how to build community. Because I believe that is one of the many places where Jews excel. I believe it is one of the many failings of the current American moment, right? That like all the bowling aloneness of it all is just like, it's a terrible moment that we're in. And I think Judaism does community really, really well. The thing about community is the same as Shabbat, actually, which is what I wish I had said to you when you asked me about Shabbat, which is it is very hard. To observe Shabbat requires planning. It requires preparation. To be in a community is one of the hardest things you can do. You know why? Because you know when you're in authentic community, when you don't actually like all the people in the community, right? Like, you might love them, right? You might show up for them at Shiva, but you actually don't like them. You don't agree with them, you don't like them. And I remember, like in this room right now, I know Esther Four is here, and Annie Lummerman, and Jackie Leventhal. I'm trying to think, wait, I think I heard that Rory was here too. And like, there are a bunch of us who are around in the very, very, very early days of Sixth and I. And we had to sit down and think, who do we want to get in the room? How do we get them in the room? What are the levers that we pull? And some of the levers are actually quite embarrassing to talk about. I don't want to tell you about. So community is one of the hardest things you do. But when you are in it and you need it, right? Like some of you are in this room. When people pass away, when people get married, that's when you need your community, and that's when Judaism can really shine. So read chapter 7. I don't know what chapter it is because I didn't put them in order, but yeah, of the book. And they'll talk to you about community.
I was in a big meeting on social capital and community, and there were a wide diversity of people talking tortuously about community. And there was a friend named Seth, who lives up in Kemp Mill. And he said, just tell people they can't drive to services. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very practical way to build community.
Correct. Well, that's right. I mean, community is one thing that a lot of young people don't like to hear, is that communities have boundaries. Right? Like communities have people who are in and people who are not in. And one of the things that I did learn, no offense to you millennials, is that we had to teach community here at Sixth and I. I mean, I have spent a lot of time on the Weave website, right, talking about sort of what is a weaver. This is a project that David was working on, is still working on. It's an amazing website, and he like lifts up all these different types of people who are weaving community. And what you see when you read between the lines is how difficult it is to actually build a community of care. But man, when you need it and those people show up for you, I'll never, for some reason, like when my dad died, the moment that I will never forget. I mean, there are a million moments I would never forget, but one of them was the moment when Shiva was over and someone came to our house to pick up all the leftover food. I don't even remember who it was, but they said, we knew that you wouldn't want all of these sweets in your house, and we knew that you wouldn't want to throw them away. And so we're going to take it from you and we're going to bring it somewhere so that we can feed people.
Okay, we're going to ask 2
Okay.
quick final questions. Go ahead. We'll do them together, and then you'll answer.
Okay.
How about that?
So I like to take it in a slightly different direction because your book is mostly advice for the Jews. My question is about what rabbis think. We live in a post-October 7th world, and you talked about crises of faith, but alienation from faith traditions, including our own, was on the rise for a long time before that. I was one of those people who felt like there wasn't a niche in the ecosystem for me, and that was clear from a young age. It wasn't until my 30s that I felt like Judaism was something I could take back for myself. which itself seems countercultural. If you can put your mind in a previous time, maybe before 10/7, what was the state of the discussion, maybe is the state of the discussion among rabbis about that phenomenon and what there is to do about people who don't think they have a place in movement Judaism?
Let's do it one at a time. That was a big
Okay. I mean, that is entirely why we started Sixth and I, right? Like, we started Sixth and I so that it would be a place. We called them in that moment off the bus birthwriters, right? It doesn't make sense anymore. It was a different sort of time, but it was people who there was some sort of Tinder, right? Not Tinder the way you think of it, like some sort of like spark that had been lit. Sorry, I forgot. I used to know all like the in phrases when I worked here. There was some sort of spark that had been lit, and someone felt that finally there was a doorway that they felt that they could walk through. You know, we rabbis we first sort of destroyed Judaism in 20th century America, and now it's our job to sort of build it back up and to really show Judaism as a place that, show Judaism as a civilization that can meet you exactly as you are and that can accept and welcome you exactly as you are. It might also demand something of you. It will definitely demand something of you. But in that first moment, this sort of come as you are moment, that's what Judaism intends to be in this world. That is the messianic Judaism that we want to build. And so, yeah, look, for the ash heap of horrible Hebrew school, post-Holocaust 20th century, early 21st century Hebrew school is something that we're still dealing with. But the idea that Judaism doesn't belong to all of us is something, it is a fallacy, it is a falsehood, and whoever you are, if you still feel that way, then you should fight for the Judaism that you deserve to have as part of this crazy, concocted community that we've cobbled together.
Okay. We have 2 minutes, so final question, sir.
The last word. I've been asking you questions for many years, Rabbi Shira.
Yes, you have.
And my question is that many of these suggestions that you make in traditional Judaism, they're obligations, they're mitzvot. People have to do them. If you observe, you must observe the Shiva this way. You must observe Shabbat. The world that you present has all of the necessary things to do, but why is it different than a New Year's resolution? What makes people want to do it consistently instead of, well, something else has come up and therefore I'm not going to do it?
Thank you. So this is David Epstein, who, along with my mother, Suzanne Stutman, wrote a book called Torah with Love. If you have ever been to Shabbat dinner at my home, which I know many of you have, whatever we do at our Shabbat dinner is because of these two people and sort of the childhoods that we grew up in together. What makes people want to do it is that it actually is meaningful. Right? It actually will make your life better to observe Shabbat. And yes, to atomize it in a certain way so that you only observe it for 14 minutes, rather than observing it for the full 25 hours. To me, would I prefer to observe it for the full 25 hours? 100%. Would I prefer that you do that? I don't know. You need to figure out what's meaningful for you. So I do understand that from people working in a halachic framework, it might feel a little bit too like you might need to hold the whole framework as a piece in order to get meaning from any one piece of it, because how do we know which piece is going to give us meaning at any point? But I think for the people that I have worked with in the rabbinate that I built sort of by accident, right? Those are not people for whom the word obligation is very resonant. Those are people for whom the word meaning is very resonant. And if you want to build a life of meaning, I really believe that all you have to do is, don't start with this book, start with the Torah, but then, next you can read this book.
Okay.
Are we done?
So, Torah is pretty good. This is more readable, actually.
It is more readable, that's true.
Just to conclude, it's been moving for me to be up here, just because when Joshua had his bar mitzvah here, it was a beautiful building.
Yeah.
But it wasn't yet a community.
Yeah.
And Esther 4, I don't know where you are, Esther, but, and Shira Stutman, when I just feel the warmth in this room, one day I'd love to have a book event with so many people who like me. And so it's just a great, I just thank you for creating this.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And you'll be signing?
I'm going to be signing books.
Shira will be signing out there, probably. Yeah,
should I follow you?
Thank you so much to Rabbi Shira Stutman and David Brooks, and thank you all for joining us. If you'd like to stay for the book signing, please stay seated and we'll call you up shortly.